Welcome to the 161st episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with Meg Gardiner, author of many thriller novels, including The Shadow Tracer. Stay tuned for the interview. This interview was conducted at the Crime Bait Conference in Boston, Massachusetts. Stay tuned for the interview. The Reading and Writing Podcast is sponsored by the book-loving nerds at Riffle. Riffle is an online book community that connects readers with authors and books that they'll love. Readers use Riffle to find the next book that they want to read. And authors use Riffle to make their books stand out and drive sales. Join the Riffle community today at rifflebooks.com. That's rifflebooks.com. And look for the link in the show notes as well. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Meg Gardiner. I interviewed Meg previously in episode 16 of the podcast. Meg is the author of two suspense series, the Evan Delaney series and the Joe Beckett series. However, her last two novels, Ransom River and The Shadow Tracer, are standalone thriller novels. Meg, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Sure. Well, your latest book, The Shadow Tracer, was published in June. For those listeners who haven't heard about the novel yet, how would you describe it?
It's a thriller. It's about a young woman named Sarah Keller who is a skip tracer. It's her job to track down people who have gone on the run, ducking arrest warrants, subpoenas, the repo men, and she's supposed to find them and help bring them to justice. And then in the book, she ends up going on the run herself with her 5-year-old daughter.
Well, I know that some of the book has to do with like personal privacy and you know, obviously it was published while all of the Edward Snowden stuff was going on, and it keeps coming out. I mean, you know, obviously the latest that we're, you know, listening to the telephone calls of our closest allies was, have some of these recent leaks surprised you? I mean, just how far, you know, the NSA is gone?
They actually have surprised me, although I really started writing the book because I was very fascinated by the question, is it possible nowadays in the 21st century to actually go off the grid? We hear that phrase a lot, but can you actually disappear? Can you make yourself invisible and move out of your own life and pop up somewhere else? And so that's what I wanted to investigate.
And so do you think it's possible?
It's very difficult. If you can get out of the country where you're living and start over somewhere else, that often stops the trail of information, but you have to figure out how to do that, and you have to be willing to stay away and cut yourself off from your previous life pretty severely. So it's tricky. I'm curious,
in writing the novel or researching it, did you happen to run across this Wired.com article or Wired magazine where this guy went off the grid and basically dared the readers to find him?
I did. I read that article. Of course they did. Well, because it was a challenge for the magazine. They sort of he was required to give clues. But people are the private eyes and skip tracers, much less the government or FBI or stalkers, bad guys. It depends on how much money they have and how motivated they are to find you, and how diligent you're going to be in completely erasing your past and not going back to revisit it. I mean, people try to disappear all kinds of ways. They try to fake their own death, which is really stupid, or they'll go away and then come back for like a bridal shower, and then of course the cops and the skip tracers are all sitting outside. If you posted it on Facebook, yes, I'll be there.
So what was the research process like for this novel?
I read an awful lot, and I realized how difficult it is to maintain your privacy when I ordered a couple of books online about skip tracing. And as soon as I clicked buy, a dialog box popped up and it said, "Do you want to share with all your social networks that you bought How to Disappear?" No, I did not want to share that news with everybody who would.
Yeah.
So, but just reading a lot about how skip tracers work and about cases where people have tried to go underground and it's gone wrong or right. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean now, I'm sure you're aware, with this, whole thing called like the quantified self, where people, have tracking devices like bracelets and stuff that track when they run and walk and automatically upload that data.
Exactly.
It's pretty bizarre.
And in the book, of course, Sarah Keller, the heroine in the book, she finds out that her daughter has a microchip embedded under her skin that she never knew about. And so who has put it there and why?
Exactly. So now that you've written and had 11 novels published, has the writing process changed for you in terms of when you're working on a book? Do you usually have a sense of what you'll write next, or do you scramble around for an idea when you finish?
I always scramble around for an idea. I try not to. If I try to crowd my head with too many things, it all just turns to mush. But the writing process has become more efficient because I have learned that when you have a deadline, you actually have to get it done by the deadline, and that's an extremely good motivator to sit down and find out how to get the words on the page and fix them up so that they're readable.
Well, I noticed a recent interview with you, and you mentioned that you had written 4 novels before you wrote the first novel that you had published, China Lake. What was that learning process like for you when you were writing those early novels?
Well, this includes the novel I wrote when I was 15 years old, and I thought I would write the world's greatest love story because I was 15 and thought I knew everything. And that one stuck in the bottom of a drawer someplace, and I hope that the friends I gave it to will never use it in blackmail against me. Oh, I had to learn that, the initial efforts, I might have had a cool character, or a couple of cool characters. I might have had some scenes where the dialogue really kind of sparked. I might have had some scenes where it was funny or there was some suspense going on, but I had to learn that that's not a book. You have to actually have a plot. You have to have a story that sustains and carries these characters through some big adventure. And until I figured out how to do that, everything was going to go in the file cabinet.
Right. Well, you started your writing career with 2 successful series, and now you've written 2 standalone thriller and suspense novels. What are you working on next?
It's actually another standalone. Book coming out in June 2014. It's going to be called Phantom Instinct, and I'm going to tell you about it right now because I got to keep you in suspense. That's my job.
Yes. Well, what advice do you have for aspiring writers who may be listening who would like to get their own stories or novels published?
Persevere and read contemporary thrillers, contemporary suspense novels, if that's what you want to write. Not so that you can study the market or be crass about it, but so that you see the breadth and depth of the stories that are being told and the brilliance of the writing, and see how high the bar is and what's been written about too much, what people seem to be really loving. Find the books that you love and figure out what it is about it that you love, and then write the book that you want to read.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of reading, what books or authors have you read lately that you would recommend, either fiction or nonfiction?
I am currently reading Michael Connelly's The Reversal. Michael Connelly is always a guaranteed, he is the Lincoln of suspense authors. You are always going to have a smooth, fast, really wonderful ride with anything that he writes. I've been reading James Lee Burke, who is probably the most wonderful author working in America at the moment. Sue Grafton remains, of course, one of my favorites. Kinsey Milhone is like, meeting up with one of my best friends again every year, so I'm delighted to do that. I've been reading a lot of fiction, so that's what I'm on. And Lee Child, what was I going to say, Tess Gerritsen. I could go on for the next hour, so I'll stop there.
Sure. Well, again, we've been speaking with Meg Gardiner, thriller and suspense writer. Meg's latest novel, The Shadow Tracer, is in bookstores now, so grab a copy. Meg, thanks for doing this interview.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, great. Thank you.